Thank you for attending another one of our Inform sessions today. This is the second one that we are delivering with the NetApp on NetApp team. The first one we had was last month, and it was about how at NetApp we manage our storage with Ansible. So this session will be is recorded, and I will every session that we do we're going to post them to the same site. So I will send you the link after after David has presented, and you will be able to actually revisit the presentation. So today we have invited David Fox, who is a senior IT systems engineer at NetApp. David will go over how we manage, automation and containerized apps inside NetApp. And David, I'll leave it over to you. So you can start your presentation, and if you can maybe introduce yourself and what your role is at NetApp.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Elias. And thanks everybody for attending. A little bit about myself. Again, my name's David Fox. I'm in the IT organization on the tools and automation team. Prior to that, I worked at SAIC and on a federal government contract, and then before that at IBM. In all these roles, more or less been in that system admin, system engineer type capacity. And throughout my 14 years of experience, it's one of the big challenges is, wrapping your head around how do you define a healthy state of your environment, right? So it's gotten a lot better over 14 years. We've got a lot more capable tooling, and today we're going to talk about some of that. So just moving right along into some of that tooling. Within our IT organization, we're heavy users of Ansible. Been using Ansible since 2014. So just a little bit of a background. What is Ansible? Ansible, the bread and butter of that is really its capabilities as a configuration management solution. So what do I mean by this? So if you're trying to deploy an app, you need to make sure that the package for the application is installed. You need to make sure that the certain configurations in place, a certain database server exists, that it has certain properties, et cetera, et cetera. So when I say configuration management, it's really what I'm talking about, configuring the individual server to make sure that it's appropriate for whatever you're trying to do, like if you're trying to deploy an app stack, for example. So that's its bread and butter. Ansible, however, on top of config management, also a very powerful IT orchestration solution. And by that, what I mean is not only can it configure servers, but it can do things like spin up a server or snapshot a server, or more complex orchestration such as patching a cluster of servers and then rebooting one node at a time and making sure that it comes back up in a good state before you reboot the next one in the list. So a very powerful tool, has those big capabilities. On top of all that, Ansible Core is 100% open source, and specifically it's GPL v3. So it's a strong copyleft. Contributor modules may or may not be GPL v3, but they're all going to be, in that bigger open source umbrella. So it could be BSD, MIT, Apache, but generally speaking, not only is Ansible powerful, it's also open source, which is a nice plus. So we talked a little bit about what Ansible is. Let's talk about how you use it. What does that look like? Ansible uses or leverages playbooks that engineers or operators will create to do tasks. A playbook is really just a YAML document. And that YAML document fundamentally says, do these things on these hosts. On the screen, this is an example of a very complicated playbook, but it sort of kind of illustrates, some of the key components. Highlighted is one play in a larger playbook. In this case, the scope that we're applying all of these Ansible roles to. You can think about roles like lists of tasks. We're applying this to machines that are not socks. We want to use sudo, use these variables, and apply these roles under these conditions. So you could have one play in a playbook. You could have multiple plays in a playbook, like in this example. And the playbook could be as simple as put this configuration file in place and that's it, or it could be very complex like what we're showing on the screen. So that's all nice, but how are we actually using it? What's the goal? I mean, the TLDR on that is we're using Ansible to automate our solutions, and we combine that with a test-driven development process, ultimately to deliver infrastructure as code and ensure a consistent experience that we can deliver efficiently. So that's the key takeaway on this slide. So digging into the weeds a little bit more, in what areas are we using Ansible within the compute sphere of IT, right? And keep in mind, we've been using, again, Ansible within our IT organization since 2014. This slide is from 2015. We've really expanded since then, but it really does give you a feel of some of the areas we're operating in. If you've got an administrative background like myself, this is probably going to look familiar. So just to highlight some of these items, YumConf, configuring the package manager on Red Hat-based distributions, LDAP, making sure the LDAP clients are configured properly, looking to the right LDAP servers. We're making sure NTP clients are configured right. We're using it to set up metrics agents and the metrics service and all sorts of other stuff. And the name of the game is, again, just making sure that these things are done and done consistently and stay consistent. So we've, been doing this for a while, since 2014, talked about test-driven development and what that means for us and why we're doing it. But what's the real benefit? So 2014, I think our first use case, or I know our first use case for Ansible within NetApp IT was to take this, it was a manual operations type project, to manually configure, 4,000 machines to point to our new NTP time servers, right? So, traditional type, engagement where you ask your operations team to go perform this thing, make this change, you have status updates. Some people wrote scripts. Scripts are what they are. They're good, but they often leave gaps. And what we were able to do is take that very traditional operations manual-centric process and deliver it consistently and efficiently. And if you break it down, we have about 4,000 machines. And, with that being manual, that added up to something like 341 hours of effort. And once that's done, one, you're going to find it's not consistent. I mean, people are going to, mess things up. I mean, if I were doing it, I would certainly, mess things up. It's just a lot to do, right? That's inevitable. And then at the end of the day, once you've completed all that, there's no guarantee that it stays correct. Somebody can go change something inadvertently, or maybe there's an automated process that does it. With Ansible, we were able to take that manual process and shrink it down to 5 minutes worth of work in a single file. When we do it, it's programmatically consistent. Once we deploy it, it's going to stay consistent because we're going to continuously run that same playbook to enforce that same desired state. So at this point, I'm talking a lot about compute. You're probably thinking, all right, Dave, you work for a storage company. Tell us about storage. Well, the product team really came through with that. In 2017, they released the ONTAP modules for Ansible. And what that allows us to do is bring those same types of mentalities, those same capabilities that we've traditionally been using in the compute space to bear in the storage space. And Elias, I think Ezra, last week we might have talked about this, same things. There might be a little bit of overlap, but it's very powerful stuff. Some of the things that our storage engineering team are doing, it looks a lot like compute. They're able to do a lot of the same things. So using our NetApp modules in conjunction with some of the other modules that already exist in the community to do things like configure the network port interfaces, configure info blocks, get DNS records, now configure storage. The storage could be SolidFire, it could be E-Series, it could be ONTAP. You can you can have a playbook that does all of that and configures your compute and configures your app. You can really now start to think about delivering full infrastructure as code, storage included. And since it's Ansible, of course, it's easy. Again, maybe a little bit of overlap from last week, and shamelessly borrowing from Ezra's deck, these are some of the things that he's doing on the storage side with Ansible in terms of automation, day one activities, lifecycle management. I'm not going to go through all of this. It sounds like that's already been covered. I'm probably not the best person to go over it, not being a storage expert, but you can see that a lot of the same types of things from a storage perspective, Ezra and his team are using Ansible to take care of those things like I was using Ansible to take care of on the compute side, and we're reaping the same benefit. Okay, so before I go any further, are there any questions on any of that? Okay, cool. So let's talk about Trident. And really, before we talk about Trident, we really need to talk about Kubernetes. So what is Kubernetes? Kubernetes is fundamentally a container scheduler. The elevator pitch, I think, would be it allows you to deliver compute resources and bring those to bear quickly for application stacks that you need to deploy as Docker images. So you have this immutable image. You need to deploy that quickly, supply configuration via text file. This is what Kubernetes does very well. Kubernetes, however, is not a full featured solution on purpose. It's a batteries not included system. So for things like network, for things like storage, you've got to bring your own batteries. Within our IT organization, we use OpenShift, which is a Red Hat fork of the community Kubernetes. But for all intents and purposes, especially in this presentation, you can think about OpenShift Kubernetes almost simultaneously, right? The key takeaway, again, is Kubernetes is a container scheduler, brings compute resources to bear for your applications delivered as Docker containers. And so while, its batteries not included, well, NetApp product team, again, coming through with the win, they're supplying the batteries for storage. And that's where Trident comes in. Trident is to storage what Kubernetes is to compute. It allows us to bring storage resources to bear for application stacks quickly. So when our application team, when they come up with or develop a application stack and put that in a Kubernetes manifest to define the state that they need, I need X amount of CPU, X amount of RAM, and X amount of storage. Right? They put all of this in one templated manifest. They commit the manifest to the Kubernetes or the OpenShift cluster. Kubernetes delivers the compute. Trident delivers storage. And they get out. They get their application out the door in seconds, right? So it's very quick, very easy, and it's abstracted away from the application teams. All they have to do is focus on delivering value to the business in the form of their application. Trident takes care of delivering the storage for them. So, any questions before I go any further? Because, now what I really want to talk about is, how, I guess as you could tell, like in the past, like we've had these, different teams that are automating in their different areas, and that's good, and we're all seeing our efficiency gains from a compute perspective. I'm seeing gains with Ansible. We're able to, do test-driven development, deliver capabilities quickly to the business, using Ansible and the storage modules. The storage team is able to do the same thing using NetApp storage, and also with Trident, they're able to deliver container-native storage to containerized application stacks running at OpenShift very quickly. But it's almost like we've been operating in, little pockets. Borrowing from Mike Morris's slide deck, He's our senior director and our sponsor for the next generation data center project that I'm currently working on. We're looking at things as, like levels of DevOps maturity. And what we had done in the past, we're really at sort of kind of this level 2 state where, we're using Ansible in these pockets. So, Ezra's using Ansible in, computer engineering, and totally separate from that is what the Gopi's team is doing in terms of computer engineering. I might have gotten that backwards, but you get what I'm saying, right? And then you've got other teams and application teams that are using Ansible for delivering application stacks. So you've got all these little pockets, and you're getting the efficiency, but there's still more gains to be had. And so that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to go from, level 2 ultimately to level 5. And I think we're sort of kind of at level 3. We've taken these silos in our NGDC project. We've sort of kind of brought some focus to all that. So we've got all this automation that we've got with Ansible and the ONTAP modules for Ansible and with Trident, and we're focusing all that and bringing it to bear to solve a very concise problem. What is that problem? NGDC vision. Key takeaway here is the problem we're trying to solve is we want to rapidly deliver value to the business. We want to standardize and deliver simple things. Part of this, how we do this is, again, we're leveraging Ansible. And in the diagram, this flow talks about how we're using Ansible and Ansible Tower to deliver the application stack. What I really need a slide for is how we're using that same Ansible Tower to also deploy our infrastructure, and that includes our storage, and how we're really, in a way, using our ONTAP modules together with Trident to deliver a cohesive solution that's all aligned towards this NGDC vision. Let me show you an example of what that ultimately looks like. So this is a playbook that we're using, or will be using as part of a scale-up feature I'll be releasing at the end of the quarter. And we just need to add nodes to the cluster as demand increases. And so what this playbook does is it consumes the Trident configuration and then uses that and the NetApp ONTAP modules to make sure the export policy is correct. The first time I ran the playbook, you can see there was a change. Ansible has corrected that. That host was not represented in the export policy. Storage wouldn't work there. Now it will. Once I run the playbook again, you can see everything's green. The state is the way that we need it. And it's like that because we're using the Ansible ONTAP modules to consume the Trident configuration to make sure that the export policy, the Trident's applying the volumes that it creates for OpenShift projects, is going to actually have all of the nodes in the export list that constitute our cluster. And that's just one example of how we're sort of kind of bringing all this to bear and focusing it down to solve, business problems. Let's see if I can go to the next slide. There we go. So, key takeaways. Ansible, very powerful. It's very easy. You can get started with it quickly. And that's especially true if you're using the NetApp modules. Likewise, just like Kubernetes does for compute, Trident does for storage. It brings resources to your application stacks to bear quickly if you're deploying to a Kubernetes environment. And what we found is when you use both of these tools in conjunction, it's really a case of the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, right? They really complement each other well. And so definitely use both in your environment where it makes sense for maximum effect. So that is the end of my deck. So any questions?
Hi, Dave. There's no questions on the chat. I think this is really good. I think if our partners have customers that Ansible comes into into the equation or any of the Kubernetes, Trident, any of the solutions that we use internally, it is good to know that we can actually offer some advice. I think, isn't that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's a journey, right? And I think the industry as a whole is on this, whole DevOps journey. We're probably on it first, so we've got battle scars, and we can certainly talk about those. And if anybody has any questions afterwards, shoot me an email. Let me know. I'll be more than happy to help out where I can.
Thank you very much, Dave. We will have another Inform session next month, and I will send everybody an invitation to that. Thank you very much again.